Welcome back to another week of furniture refinishing. And I've got my work cut out for me this week. Take a look at this big, beautiful set that I was able to pick up. I always find it so challenging, at least in my area, to find matching sets of furniture. And not only matching, but ones that are this large and grand. I really lucked out. I got this from a lady who was moving, and she initially just had the dresser listed, and I asked if I could come pick it up. And she said, "Oh, I also have the matching nightstands that were not listed anywhere. Would you also be interested in those?" So I got there, took a look at them, and was like, yes, absolutely. I will scoop up the whole package. And from the listing photos, when it was just the dresser, I had no idea that it was this big. It looked a lot smaller in photographs. There wasn't really anything next to it for scale. And by the time I got there and saw it in person, I was pleasantly surprised. So this is a newer piece of furniture. This is not anything that is vintage, but it's very, very well made and it's incredibly heavy. As you can see, it has been painted in the past. It looks like it was painted with a latex paint, just judging on how it is coming off. From a distance, it doesn't look that bad, but once you get up close and really get to take a look at the paint job, you can see where it's starting to come away. It's doing that traditional thing that latex paint does where it balls up and peels instead of flakes off. It's more gummy. So to remove this finish, I'm absolutely going to have to use a chemical stripper. I'm not going to even try with my sander because it would gum it up pretty badly. Besides the paint job, everything else looks to be in excellent condition. I will be changing out these knobs. I don't think these were the original knobs anyway, and I am missing a few of them. I think that I'm going to lean into this almost French provincial style. It's not exactly French provincial, but it has those serpentine curves. So I am going to get some more traditional hardware to put onto these pieces and hopefully be able to refinish them as a set. Follow along with me as I tackle this giant project this week. I better get started because this is going to take a while. I basically am going to plan on stripping all of these pieces down. And what with them being so large and so grand, it's going to take a while. Because of this, I really, really hope that these pieces strip nicely. Ideally, what I'd absolutely love to do is to actually do a dark stained look. I think that would be really, really pretty on these pieces. Got some treasures in here, some old pieces of the drawers. But like I said before, besides some drawer track pieces that need to be replaced in the dresser, these are in excellent shape. I really can't believe how solid, sturdy, and undamaged they are. Pretty much every one of these plastic drawer glides are broken in the dresser. This is pretty common and they're pretty easy to replace. You can get replacement parts for these relatively easy. And the typical culprit, it's super dusty and dirty. So I will go ahead and vacuum and clean the interior of this piece. Because I am planning on using chemical stripper to strip this paint and the old finish off, I don't have to worry quite so much about cleaning the exterior, but I absolutely want to get this gross, dusty, dirty mess out of the interior of the dresser. I absolutely lucked out, and this stripper did its job on these pieces. I was able to get away with just doing one coat, and it pretty much took off all of that paint and a good portion of the finish underneath. I grabbed some acetone and a very fine steel wool and used plenty of product to buff away any of that residual finish or white paint that might have clung on to any of the grooves and detailed areas. A little trick that I have found when cleaning up with acetone is to make sure and wipe it back pretty soon after with a clean paper towel. Acetone will dry down really fast, and if it still has some of that old brown finish will dry down with it and just leave a residue on the top. So buff it on and wipe it back as soon as possible, and it leaves a pretty clean surface. It's the next day, and I actually got quite a bit accomplished yesterday. I was able to get all 14 of those drawers stripped down and one whole nightstand completely stripped, as well as the top of the second. So I'm hoping to be able to finish that second nightstand and hopefully the dresser today, at least getting all of the paint off and getting it prepped and ready to be sanded. I was really happy that these legs were able to just unscrew off. They're just threaded in there with a bolt. It would have been so much more challenging to try to have to strip with these legs still on because they're so detailed. Pieces with a lot of detail like this set can be a little intimidating to strip and sand down. I find that you just have to have a lot of patience and really work with those grooved and detailed areas. I'm always grabbing different tools. I have a variety of different picks and little flathead screwdrivers to really scrape out those areas that are hard to reach. And I find if the acetone is working well, to just keep doing multiple rounds and even if you've already done an area with the acetone, go back in and hit it again, and it will most likely take up whatever is still clinging on. This piece did take me several days to fully strip down, and it's because they were so large, so detailed, and it was a full set. If this had been a much more stubborn paint that did not come off quite so easily with stripper, I don't know if I would have been able to tackle this as successfully as I was able to. Now that all of these are completely stripped down, and before I get to sanding, I am going to go ahead and start to fill these singular knob holes on all of the drawer fronts. I am looking to replace the hardware with 2 handles instead of one singular knob. So this hole will have to be filled and then camouflaged to blend in with the rest of the wood grain of the drawer fronts. Whenever I am sanding a piece with any sort of curves or details, I always reach for my foam abrasives that fit on my different sanders. I have one both for my orbital sander and my rectangular detail sander. They work great for different purposes. The orbital sander works best for curved drawer fronts exactly like these. That just lets it mold a little bit better. It doesn't work great for the very tiny details. That's where I grab my detail sander with that foam abrasive, and that usually helps to take off any stubborn finish without removing any of the pretty carved details in the wood. I am opting to use 120 grit sandpaper for this. That was really all that I needed. The majority of the old finish did come off with that stripper and acetone. Even though I worked so hard at stripping and removing all that paint and old finish, it still takes a lot of time to sand. I really want to make sure that I'm very, very thorough with my sanding. And you can see there are some areas that I was a little bit less patient with the acetone, and I just figured it was a flat enough surface like the top of this one nightstand that I could just sand away the rest of that finish, no problem. Time to finally get some color on this piece. I have everything all sanded down. All of the drawers, the 2 nightstands, the long dresser, and all of these legs have had a good sanding. I'm now gonna go in with my base color, which is a water-based stain. At this point, I'm just using it to build upon. So the final product is not going to be this color. All of these pieces are made out of pine, and surprisingly, a lot of it is either solid wood or like all the drawers are actually laminated pieces of wood that have been glued and pressed together. It's actually very good quality. I'm very impressed with the craftsmanship of these pieces. There's not that much veneer to them, actually, just a little bit on the tops and a little bit on the sides. And I think they're going to be beautiful when they're all finished. That being said, with them being pine, sometimes pine can accept stain in a very particular way. It's a softwood, and sometimes it can be a little bit splotchy. The technique that I plan on using with getting this base color down first will just provide that warmth and depth. And then I'm going to use a tinted top coat to even out any splotchiness that might come up through this pine wood. It's just the nature of the wood. You've got to work with what you have. And I think it's going to be a beautiful result in the end. That was a lot to stain. It was a lot to strip, a lot to sand, and a lot to stain. And it's going to be a lot to top coat as well. It's the next morning and everything is dry. It was dry pretty much half an hour after I stained it. I just ran out of time in the day. I pretty much stained all afternoon. My next plan of action is to take just a clear satin top coat and seal all of the pieces. I am going to seal them apart and separately, so I'm not going to reinstall the legs yet. I'm not going to put the drawers back in the body. I'm going to just get everything sealed with at least one coat of top coat, and then I will probably start reassembling things. I'm thinking that I might still leave the legs off until after I'm completely done, just because it will be a lot easier to get around all these details with my sprayer if they are off. But once that top coat is done at least once on the drawers, I will probably put them back into the pieces themselves. That way, when I go ahead and apply my tinted top coat to really richen and even out this stain color, I will have even strokes and the drawers will be in the proper positioning so that they all match and look cohesive in the individual pieces. Before I start figuring out where each one of these drawers goes, I need to go ahead and replace these broken plastic drawer glides. They're a pretty easy repair. They do make this style and it's pretty readily available. Time to disguise those old hardware holes that I filled in earlier. I am going to take this paint repair kit, it's specifically made for this, and try to kind of mix up a custom color that I think will work well for this piece. I do find that this paint dries darker than it goes on when it's wet, so it's a little deceptive. So I try to mix it a little bit lighter than what I need. I'm not overly concerned. The tinted top coat does hide a lot of this filling color. With that color correcting done, I am going to go ahead and seal it with one more coat of clear top coat. I just don't want that tinted top coat to cling on to this color corrected area in any strange way. I got all the clear cleaned out of my sprayer, and now I'm going to mix up some more of this tinted top coat. I had some left over from another project that I had kept, so I will just add to it. I basically just add a bunch of clear and then a little bit of a dark brown. This one is Espresso Beans by Bear. It doesn't have to be this color. I've used a bunch of different brown colors, but just keep in mind the undertones because they might come through a little bit. And this is not an exact science by any means. I just pour a little bit in there, just enough to add the tint. Of course, the more color you pour in, the darker it will be. I like to build the coats, so I like to keep it on the lighter side, even though this is still pretty dark. I might need to end up mixing up some more of this. I'm not sure. This looks like it might not be enough because I do plan on doing probably roughly 3 coats of this mixture on everything. So I am going to mix that up now. I just want to make sure that I am starting and stopping a piece with the same color. That way I don't have any lighter areas versus darker areas. It is pretty satisfying to watch this tinted top coat go on. It really does work its magic pretty quickly. I would say, in my opinion, it does dry down to be a slightly different color than it is when it's wet. Water-based top coat does have a certain look to it before it dries. So naturally, even this tinted formula is going to be a little bit different looking when it's wet versus dry. So I always make sure that my last coat is fully dry before I judge anything. So I actually went back on my plans a little bit. This is the first coat of that tinted top coat, and I think I'm gonna stop here. I think these are absolutely beautiful. I don't know if it's because this is a lighter pine wood that it just took that tinted top coat so well with the first go around. I've used this method mostly on harder woods like oak, and I don't want to go any further than this because I don't want to lose the characteristics of this wood grain. You can still see the wood grain through some of the knots, and it's just a rich, really pretty color at this point. I do think what I am going to do though is give everything a really, really light smooth sand with a very high grit sandpaper and top coat everything one more time with just a clear top coat to really seal this in. Since I did only opt to do one coat of this tinted top coat, I want to make sure to still give a lot of protection to these pieces. And some of it is feeling a little bit rough to the touch because I just went in with that tinted top coat thinking I was going to do multiple. I usually sand right before the last couple coats of top coat especially. I had already sanded the tops, so these are buttery smooth. It's just the details in some areas of the drawer front that I would just like it to be a little bit smoother. It's really not rough at all, just a little bit of raised grain. Another factor as to why I'm only going to do one coat of this tinted top coat is the hardware. This is the hardware that I plan on using on this piece, and I think it's really pretty at this point. It really does pop, and I really like the way these two tones are playing against each other. I'm ready to start installing the hardware, wash the drawers, line them, get everything all wrapped and buttoned up. These drawers are a little bit challenging to install the hardware on. Because they have this curved detail, I have to be very careful with my placement and make sure I get it straight. I am still going to be using my template. That does help immensely. And I've already measured out everything. I want the center of them to be 4.5 inches from the edge. So I'm going to mark that on my tape. But everything kind of has to be bent and curved to make sure I'm getting a proper measurement. And because this hardware is meant to actually inset inside the actual wood itself, I do have to drill slightly larger holes, but I'm going to start off by using a drill bit that is a little bit smaller, the typical one that I usually use for regular handles and hardware, and I will just graduate up to the larger drill bit. And this is a little precarious because I don't want tear out, so I have to be a little careful. I am finding I'm having to apply quite a bit of pressure because, again, these drawers are curved, they're not straight. And in order to get this hardware to sit flush into the drawer, I do need to almost bend it slightly. And with the last of that drawer liner going in, the drawers are completely done and the pieces are completely done. Let's take a look back and remind ourselves what kind of mess I started with. These pieces were really, really large, quite ornate, and very much painted. The paint was failing, and most of those drawer tracks had broken components that needed to be fixed in order for those drawers to slide smoothly. They were really heavy, substantial, well-built pieces of furniture, so I was more than happy to scoop them up. With that being said, let's take a look and see if all of that effort was worth it in the end. These turned out exactly the way I imagined. This was the picture I had in my head when I started brainstorming what I wanted to accomplish with this set. That smooth, buttery satin top coat really does add such a luxurious and pretty touch to all these curved details. I love these pieces. This would be a set that I would consider keeping myself if I had need for them. I hope you enjoyed watching this process. It was long, it was tedious, it was hot and sweaty, but absolutely worth it in the end. Let me know what you think down below. Do you like the hardware? Do you like the color? Would you have gone a different direction? Do you think that this was worth it in the end? Thank you so much for watching, and please feel free to check out any of my other videos.